everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Disney Resorts podcast. My name's Kenny Hayes, and I am joined alongside, as always, by the one, the only, Walt Ramirez.
Hey, Ken, how's it going today?
Good afternoon. How are you, good sir?
Excellent. Things are looking up.
Absolutely. So, folks, unless you have been out of the country, you haven't been on social media, turned your TV on, Bob Chapek is out as Disney's chief executive officer, and in a surprising return, Mr. Bob Iger was reinstated immediately after his termination. We'll get into that and what we think will happen with the entire Walt Disney Corporation shortly. Some news coming out of the Walt Disney World Resort, the pirate-themed rooms that we talked about this past summer. The transformation has now begun over at Disney's Caribbean Beach with the Little Mermaid Rooms. We have some artists, actually not artist renderings. We have some pictures to bring up for you, and we'll get into that. Also, just dropped today a taping, Splash Mountain. The date has come for its retirement. We'll get into that, and we'll let you know what we think. Another topic out of the resort, Hey Disney. The Alexa version of Hey Disney is now being installed in some of the Disney resorts. We'll give our feelings on that. And before we wrap up this week's show, we will give part 2 of Walter and I's Must Do Disney. So stick around. It sounds like a great show. And before we begin, as always, do us a favor if you're watching us over on YouTube. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and as Walter would say, share with a couple friends. So, Walt, I'm going to turn it over to you for the news.
All right, Ken. So as you mentioned earlier, the Little Mermaid Rooms are going to be transitioning over at Caribbean Beach from previously the Pirate Rooms. Most folks are probably happy about that because the Pirate Rooms did not get a lot of requests. It was always like a last ditch room that you would want to have. It's beautiful renovation. I don't know how you feel about that, but I mean, I think it's subtle, and I really love the theming of the room itself. And from what I understand, it looks like there's going to be a pull-down bed, which is something that is more in line with DVC rooms, from what I read. So this is kind of a moderate room addition that is actually kind of a little bit of a plus.
Yes, you are correct. So if you saw in the pictures we just had up on YouTube, the transformation has begun, and I think will officially start running in 2023. I am in agreement with Walter. I was not overly a fan of the pirate theme rooms. I stayed there one time, and it was because it was a February trip that spanned into early March, and we were hit with a major snowstorm here up in the Northeast. So it extended our vacation by 2 days. So we were staying at Old Key West, and then we were able to get 2 nights over at Caribbean Beach, and we were very fortunate to get one of the pirate rooms. Now, I think Walter and I discussed it a long time ago. They weren't the most comfortable. Yes, it's themed well, especially for kids. It's the theming was very good. However, if you're tall like Walter and I, and you want to lay out after a long day at the parks, it wasn't always the most comfortable. You were hitting the end of the ship.
Yeah.
So now
the beds were a little bit odd.
Yeah, the beds were a little bit odd. Don't get me wrong. It was a cool theming. It was that traditional, that you were very immersed in their room. And actually, a friend of ours Andrew over at Park Rovers. And so if you're really interested in parks, check them out. They have a great page. He commented on one of our Instagram posts when this dropped the other day. And he said, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically it was, even though the room may look nice, is Disney starting to lose some of its theming? Because you see how immersed you were in the pirate room. It may not have been the most comfortable. We're not talking about how comfortable it was. We're talking about Disney immersing you into something like they do at the parks. And now you've gone with like a much more streamlined room. My personal opinion, I like the new room. The more I look at it, the more I like it. And I guess that's because in my real life, I'm trying to streamline everything. So, yeah, I'm excited. It's 2023, so I believe as of taping, the pirate rooms are still available. I could be wrong. They didn't say they weren't, because everything still indicates that 2023. The room that's refurbished is over in the Trinidad section of Caribbean Beach. So if you are a fan of the pirate rooms, you better get your butt moving and book them very shortly.
Well, see, that's the problem. You just said the word "still available," and that's the reason why, because they usually are always still available. Disney wants to eliminate that, and I think this may help them. And as you mentioned, Trinidad is the farthest section of Caribbean Beach, so that if you don't have a car and you don't really feel like waiting for the internal bus, you're going to be taking a long walk to the food court. So that's possibly another reason why it's the least popular of the sections over at Caribbean Beach. But as you mentioned, I think this is a little bit of a refresh that was needed, and most folks probably won't be as reluctant to make that reservation now, because this is more of a subtle theming. I don't know how you feel about it, but when I looked at it, I thought it looked very similar to a DVC type of a room. I mean, obviously much smaller, but along those lines.
Well, it looked like just like your run of the mill DVC studio. And
right.
To your point, Walt, when you first asked me, yes, I believe it's one, if not the first, Murphy bed installed in a moderate resort.
Yes.
I like it. What I like about the Murphy bed is that it gives you that room during the day. So if you saw, you're still going to have, I believe it's a queen size bed. Then you're going to have the Murphy bed, and then you're also going to have the pull out from the wall, which is underneath the TV. So this room will continue to sleep 5. So that's good, especially
absolutely.
if you're taking care of some of those discounts in early 2023. You could pick that room up for a really good price, and if it's available, get to experience because the new theming is the Little Mermaid. So.
Yeah, I agree.
I know it's still very popular, but yeah, so I'm excited. Like I said before we wrap, I'm torn because I do like the way the room looks, and it looks very clean and streamlined. However, it's almost like missing the old part of Disney where you were very themed and very immersed when you went back to that room. So I'll be
in the minority on that because I won't miss the pirate room. So I'm glad to see that pirate room go.
Yeah.
But that kind of we could segue from there into the next story, which is the voice assistant, which is the Hey Disney segment, because possibly those Little Mermaid rooms will have a Hey Disney installed in them in the near future. So Hey Disney is basically going to be an Alexa in your room that, from early news reports on this topic, it looks as if it will help you with room service. You can ask it for additional towels. I believe it's going to also have park times, event times, and for your family and children, you're going to have storytelling, bedtime stories, probably trivia and games, that sort of thing are going to be attached to it. It's a great thing to have if it's raining out and your kids are bored and you can't get out to go to the parks. But if it's a beautiful day out and I'm heading to the parks, you're going to get minimal usage out of this. Not to mention the fact that you don't know who's listening to you and your conversations. So that kind of creeps me out a little bit on that side of it, because, again, is this one of those, Google situations where, you say something and next thing you know, there's an ad popping up for something that you just mentioned, like they do on your phone all the time. So, like if I mention, Epcot, all of a sudden I'm going to have, a list of restaurants that I can go to at Epcot on the screen.
Hey, Walt.
Exactly. So I mean, how do you feel about that? Because I personally, I could do without it. It's not really for, in my wheelhouse.
Well, I don't think it's really anything to get you're just gonna knock your socks off. I have that Alexa currently in my house. I do use it. I basically use it for music only. I like to listen to music a lot when we're home or cleaning the house, and so I do use it. However, like you said, you never know who's listening. I don't care how much they say they're not listening; they're listening. It's just like your phone. You could have a topic with a friend or a family, and then you log into Facebook or one of them, and the first ad to come up is exactly what you were just talking about.
Yep.
I do like the fact that you can order towels. Now, in my opinion, you better be allowed to order coffee, but that's how they're going to get me, because I'm going to say, "Hey, Disney, bring me coffee to my room," and they're going to cheap out and they're going to bring me the least amount possible. So I'm still going to pick up the phone like the good old days until they get rid of that and call mousekeeping and say, "Bring me all you got."
They're going to
But no,
bring you one.
it's nothing that's going to be like, "Oh wow, this is great." You can look at it as, "Hey, it's a nice touch for the room." It's just more Disney immersion. Right now, as of taping, they are testing these in some of the rooms over at the Polynesian Resort. These are being installed as we speak. How quickly the rollout is going to be, we don't know yet. But they said the end result will be, whether you're at a deluxe, moderate, or value, eventually this is going to be in every resort room. So if you are an Alexa fan and you like this, then you're going to be very happy. I think a lot of the world is going to be, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that they're adding, which is always a good thing because they've subtracted quite a bit of things from your experience. So, it's a little thing, but, we always complain and rail against them taking away all the little things. So we can't really complain too much about them when they add it on. So speaking of adding, and the big story that we mentioned at the beginning, and that we are not avoiding, but we wanted to hit on some other minor news topics before we get into this, because we're going to probably be at this for a little while, is Bob Iger's return. Now, I was at work and I hadn't looked at my phone. It was early in the morning, and I see a message from Ken. And when I first saw it, I'm like, no, he's got to be pulling my leg. So I immediately went to check, and sure enough, in the middle of the night, it looked like Bob Chapek was given his walking papers. I believe was it officially on Thanksgiving, or was it the day after Thanksgiving?
I believe the date was the week.
Friday?
So it was I think it was November 20th.
Okay.
So it was days
So it was
before.
right before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So it wasn't a happy Thanksgiving at the Chapek household at all. But right now, I think that I was a little bit shocked by this move, because Ken and I have talked about this in previous episodes, that Bob Chapek was re-upped by the board recently. And when that news came out, Ken and I were both bewildered by it, because things were, going so poorly that we couldn't believe that the board had just decided, he's doing a great job, we'll keep him around.
Unanimously, remember? Unanimously.
Correct. And then within, I guess, maybe a month or a little over a month, maybe, they decided they had a turnaround and decided to dump him. I don't know how that process worked behind closed doors and how they came to that decision. I know that Bob Iger was kind of floating around in the background. He was on as a consultant with the company this entire time. So his shadow was kind of hanging there for a while. And I guess the board picked up the phone and said, "Hey, do you want to take over again?" And he said, "Sure." I mean, honestly, I think immediate changes may or may not occur. I know he's had a recent town hall where he's discussed a few things. But Ken, I'll let you give me your thoughts and ideas on this, because I have a theory about this as well.
So it was funny, because it was like the Disney shot heard around the world. I was getting ready for bed. It had to be 10:30, 11:15 at night. As I'm walking down the hallway, I got my phone and I looked down and I clicked open. I had a Facebook open. And I see one of the major Disney outlets saying, "Bob Chapek fired. Iger reinstated immediately." And I'm like, no way. No
Somebody's
way.
trolling me.
I was like, this has got to be fake news all the way, right? So I get into bed and I'm like, I start searching, and then and another outlet comes out with it. Another outlet comes out with it. So now I'm like Google searching, like, all right, give me some big major media company to tell me that this is true. All right, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, 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 boom. It just went on fire, and we're, Walter and I, we do not know him personally, and we're never going to know him personally, but our opinions of somebody who were big Disney fans. I mean, we have our own podcast. He was god awful for the company. God awful for the company. The damage that he has done in his 2+ years as CEO. Now, granted, he went through something that none of us hopefully will ever have to go through. Running a major corporation with a pandemic and not knowing what to do and which way to go. And 1 minute you're like, I have to shut down everything that we're doing and somehow pay the bills. So I understand it. It was a tough spot he was in. But my opinion was, and Walter and I have said it, even though we've joked about, what are we going to do now, Walt? Our jokes. We're not going to have to talk about Bob Chapek autograph pictures no more.
We're going to run out of material.
We're going to run out of material now. But my feeling was, and my feeling still is that the Disney CEO is a very unique position. It is not your run-of-the-mill chief executive officer. It's so big, the media company. And someone, whether it's he or she, not only has to have great business savvy, but also has to have that ability that be able to imagine and dream and think of the biggest things possible. And that's what made Disney what it is. And I don't think Bob Chapek had an ounce of that in his soul. He is good at one thing, the bottom dollar, carving as much money out of that company as possible. And that's what he did. And it sounds like from the reports, now we don't have no inside information, but articles you read, that it was pretty much a coup from within. His major, department heads, I would say, were going back to the board, and that's what's rumored, is they were going back to the board sometime after his extension in the summertime, that he was just, they were saying is that he took all the power away from the department heads. And also by the power, also meaning the spending power. So they were basically figureheads, and him and his top lieutenants were running Disney, and they were doing a very good job of just running it into the ground. So I am not going to shed a tear. I am very happy that Iger is back, but time will tell. He's got a lot of damage control, and I don't know if his 2-year contract is going to be enough to do it. And, the successor version, I know you're going to talk about that, Walt. Turn it back over to you. That's one of his biggest dilemmas, is who's next? Because the first round wasn't so hot. What do you think?
Yeah, that definitely wasn't. Do you think that there are, and I know that we talked about this earlier, but do you think that there's going to be any immediate changes to any of the things? And I'm not talking long-term things now. I'm just talking near-term customer-based things that have been pretty much decimated over the last 2 years. Do you think that those will be turned around relatively quickly?
Well, you have all the rumors that were coming out was he's going to get rid of the park reservation system. He's going to change the annual passes, which are currently still unavailable. He's going to change the park hopping. And he said in his town hall meeting that no decision has been made. He has to get up to speed. Oh, and let me include, and nothing with Genie Plus either yet. He has to get up to speed on everything because he has been out of touch, with the Disney Corporation for about 11 months now. And he said he's going to have meetings with Josh tomorrow, who is the chairman of Parks, and then he will come back and make a decision. Now, that's how good leaders lead. You look at your top advisors, here is your department heads, your chairmans, and say, Josh, lay it out to me. What's the pros? What's the cons? Can we give something back to the people that they really want and it not affect the bottom dollar and not affect the experience that right now we are operating under? So I think in some portion, you will see a change in early next year when it comes to that, because for you and I and for everyone listening, changes to that are major for us, but they're very minute for the corporation.
Correct.
You know what I mean? He's got bigger things to worry about, like Disney Plus, Reedy Creek, the whole company as a whole that is really in, it's probably in one of its worst spots that it's ever been.
What do you think is the number one thing, though, that you think, because I have an idea, but what do you think the number one thing is that he could fix immediately that is probably the easiest and the quickest thing to fix?
I think the annual pass, and I think the elimination or definitely a change in the park hopping. And I think that ties into the park reservation system, because you could still, I think with the annual pass, you're going to have to reinstate that. And then the rumor was, prior to that town hall meeting, was that they were going to reinstate the annual passes. And then if you bought a park hopper, you were no longer going to be subject to the 2 o'clock hopping. The rumor was that the 2 o'clock park hopping would be eliminated for anyone who purchased the park hopping pass, and that the 2 o'clock would be rolled back to a earlier time for current annual pass holders. So even with that, I was excited as someone who is a pass holder, who is probably going to re-up his pass in January of next year, actually next month. I'm not 100%, but I am leaning that way. That's exciting to me, that I could actually park hop and do what I used to do occasionally, because I don't like doing it a lot anymore. They hit 3-4 parks in a day. But it's almost impossible now, unless you're like, after 2 o'clock, you travel to the next one. You literally go through the gate and turn around and come back, get in your car, go to the next park, and be like, hey, I did all four parks in one day.
It's virtually impossible to do all four now. But I agree with you. I think the number one thing right now is going to be the annual pass. I think they have to address it. I think it's the easiest and the quickest thing to address. I think there might be some slight changes to that, because whatever the reason was in the first place that they put that in place, I don't know if it was because of a theory that they had about crowd control, or eliminating the daily local visitors that came in that would maybe congest the parks. I don't know what that theory was, but I think that is going to be probably the number one thing. I agree with you about the hopping. That has to that was ridiculous from the get-go. That was something that was implemented, I believe, during COVID, perhaps for, distancing and spreading people out in terms of all of that they, at the time were implementing. That should have been eliminated once they reopened, because there was absolutely nothing about that makes sense, other than the fact that it prevents you. And well, let me reiterate something. It does make sense, because it now forces you to buy a longer ticket, because if you're somebody who is very informed and used to getting around in the parks, you could navigate a park or all the parks within, say, a 2-day hopper pass, where you could knock out all the parks. Now, with this hopping, you'd be lucky to get 2 parks in, because by the time you get to that park after 2 o'clock, with the time restrictions that they have now, where you have parks closing much earlier than they did in the past. Because in the past, you'd have parks open till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning with the extra magic hours. Now, some parks are closing at 7, 8 o'clock on certain days and certain times of the year. So it's almost impossible. Like you said, you would have to literally walk in, turn around, and walk back out again to hit all 4 parks in one day. And I've done all 4 parks. I used to do that early on when I was first going to Disney. It wasn't that hard to do if you planned it out, especially with the extra magic hours at the end of the night. But I think that needs to go. I think the park reservation system is probably going to be the last thing on the list, and I think it's probably going to be something that might be here to stay a little while longer. Again, that's another one that's a head scratcher for me, because I don't see why they really care where you go. You paid for your ticket. You know, in your case, you're an annual pass holder. So that should give you preferential treatment to then make decisions as to which parks you want to go, and not be beholden to a park that all of a sudden, say you get up in the morning and, you know, it's a cloudy, drizzly day out, and you're like, you know what, I was going to go to Epcot, but I really don't want to walk around Epcot and get soaked. I'd rather go to Magic Kingdom, where I can duck in and out of, you know, stores and rides that are mostly indoor rides. But now I can't, because I have to go back and change my reservation, and now Magic Kingdom might not be available. It's a gigantic problem that you're creating for customers. I think they need to streamline that and, you know, and make that much more consumer and you know, visitor friendly for people, especially people like us who are, you know, are fans.
Well, let me ask you this question. Unless I'm missing something, like I said, even if you eliminate the park reservation system, you could still keep all 4 parks at whatever your current capacity levels are. So, you know, pre-COVID, if Magic Kingdom, say, hit capacity, or Magic Kingdom was, you know, at a high capacity level, then hey, I'll swing over to Epcot, where I can walk around, get on a couple of rides, grab some food, because, you know, it's nowhere near capacity. I think that's the problem now, is you have 4 parks running near or at the top, and then you can't park hop till 2 o'clock, the earliest. Now, if Walter goes to Magic Kingdom and he's not rope dropping, and he doesn't get there till 10, 11 o'clock, chances are, if he has kids, he's not leaving at 2 o'clock to go to another park.
Correct.
Because they haven't fulfilled that day yet. And even if you have, now you got to go, if you're going to Epcot, of course, you could jump on the monorail, or you're taking busing, or even if you have your own car. I never really understood it, because capacity is capacity, period.
Right.
So whether it's a park reservation system or not, you know, hey, if I had an annual pass and I rolled up to Magic Kingdom and they were at capacity, guess what? I turned around and left.
And how often did that ever happen?
Yeah, and it's very few, you know, right around this time of year, you know, around that Christmas, stuff like that. There are very few times that they hit capacity. Like I said, they haven't made it public, you know, what the exact capacity levels are now. And they probably never will. But
in 20 plus years of going to Disney, the only times I ever felt where it was super congested was around, like you said, the holidays, or if we were going to even like a holiday event or a party. I've been to a Christmas party that I was literally wall-to-wall people, where you could barely move, especially around the hub area around the castle. And I've never experienced a situation where I ever went into a park, regardless of which park, where I said to myself, wow, I can't even move around in here. I have to leave. So now, again, granted, I don't go around the holidays, but this really, the little secret about all of this, I think, has to do with payroll. I think they created this during COVID, and they realized that they can control payroll by having a park reservation system, because now they know how many people per day are going into these parks that have the reservations. They can calculate using algorithms of, you know, people's habits of where they're going to go after 2 o'clock. And they realize, okay, we can cut certain payroll, certain staffing in certain parks at certain times. And the company that I work for now is doing the same thing, where it's the one thing that you have, it has an immediate impact to your bottom line, is your payroll. So if you can cut back on that, it saves you some money. Long term, it's short-sighted. And as you pointed out, Bob Chapek was all about the bottom line and making money. And he probably looked at that and said, hey, I can save some money by keeping this park reservation system in place. Because as you pointed out, the park reservation system has really no usage whatsoever in terms of crowd control. because like I said, I've never experienced a situation where I've been on vacation, and we pretty much vacation around the same times every year, early spring, late fall, occasionally around maybe around Thanksgiving. Sometimes we've been there in middle of winter, and any of those. And I've been there most recently in the summertime, like in June. I've never felt a situation where I went into Magic Kingdom, let's say, for example, where I went, wow, I have to leave because I feel so uncomfortable. I can't even move around in here. I felt frustrated because I had to wait on rides, long lines for rides, but it wasn't a situation where I said to myself, wow, this park's at capacity. I have, so again, I think this was created to control payroll, and they decided to keep it around under the guise of, COVID and crowd control, which now has, for the most part, completely gone away in terms of restrictions on, people and distancing and all of that. So the other aspect too that we could talk about with this is, I have a theory. I don't know if you would subscribe to this theory. We talked about this a couple days ago. I think that Bob Iger looked at the situation. Now, Bob Iger is obviously a super bright guy. Everybody knows that he was there for Pixar, Lucasfilms acquisitions, and all of these things in the company. I looked this up. The market cap of Disney grew by $180 billion under his tenure for the 15 years he was there. So think about that. So obviously the board was reluctant to let him go. He decided to leave. He couldn't find a successor. And as the Wall Street Journal article recently pointed out, his biggest failure, Bob Iger's biggest failure, is the lack of being able to find a successor, because he wanted to leave in 15, 16. Then he pushed it to 18, 19. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic started to come about, and he was like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm not saying that he timed it that way. I think he saw the writing on the wall. I think he realized this was not going to be a good situation. Maybe he wasn't up for the amount of stress. Maybe he didn't want to tarnish his legacy. And Bob Chapek was a good foil for that legacy to not be tarnished. I can't imagine that you would, and Ken, you could speak to this. You have people that work for you, and you know what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. And especially somebody that you've been with working with for years. And would you feel comfortable saying to that person, okay, I'm out, you can take over? You would know whether or not that person was going to fail. I think Bob Iger knew full well that Bob Chapek was not capable of running Walt Disney World, or the company Disney, the company itself, the way it should have been run. And he probably said this thing is going to take a turn. I mean, unless everything breaks his way, he's probably going to screw this up. And I'll stick around because I know eventually I can come in and clean up the mess and continue to make my legacy look pretty good. And by the way, he also now he came on with this theory of, I'm going to be around for 2 years. He can always now point the finger. He can always point the finger at Bob Chapek now, because, if you start complaining about, say, whatever issue there is out there on the agenda, he could always say, hey, listen, I'm trying to do my best here, but Bob screwed this up so bad. It's going to take me a little. He's going to always be the fall guy. And I'm not defending Chapek, because Chapek really did screw this up royally. And there were many people I think he could have probably have leaned on for advice to get out of this mess.
Well, but think about this, Walt. So and I may jump around a little bit because I got a lot of things going in my head.
Yeah.
You look at when Chapek was taking over about 30 days prior to the pandemic. Then the pandemic hits. Then, not so very shortly after the pandemic hits, Disney goes, you're basically going to, even though Bob's going to stay, Chapek's going to stay the CEO, you're going to help him run it through this for a couple months. So then he's kind of he's in the shadows of Chapek. And anyone who's leads doesn't like someone right in their shadows, watching every decision they make and saying, hey, Bob, I wouldn't have done this. Hey, Bob, maybe you should do this. It's like, it's my company now. I want to run it the way I want to run it, even if I run it into the ground. So, which he did. But then they make him chairman of the board. So then there's another, he's not leaving again. So I think even the board knew that Chapek's failure was a lot more, how would you say it? Was there more than him succeeding. They felt that he was greater feeling of a loss than it was a victory. And it was like keeping the Hall of Famer, in the bullpen. Hey, Bob, we're going to need you back. And then Bob decided to leave, and, he was fully gone, effective almost a year ago. He left as chairman of the board. But think about this for something. And this is what people forget. And like I said, I'm not knocking Bob Iger because I think he did a terrific job his first round. Bob Chapek was the head of parks until he became the successor. The parks started going downhill way back in 2015 when Chapek took over the parks.
Correct.
And that's when you heard from the employees, and that's when you heard from people like us complaining that starting to get cutbacks. They're starting to get cutbacks. It's not as good as it used to be. Then all of a sudden we had to start paying for parking at the resorts when it was always free. So this was Chapek. You already saw the signs, and actually talking to people who actually worked for the company. What we see now is what they saw 5, 6, 7 years ago. This man was about one thing, the bottom dollar. Mm-hmm. And if it meant cutting the magic, and if it meant cutting people's salaries or eliminating positions, he was all for that and going to do it, which he did. But that's why I said, just think about that for a minute, and why didn't Iger, as CEO, say to him, hey, you're cutting too much from the parks? Hey, I don't like this. He did what he wanted to do as the parks chairman. And what he did under Parks and that is exactly what he did as CEO. So, and I'm not blaming because it was only one portion of the Walt Disney Corporation, but it's not like it was a hidden mystery. There was some big secret about Chapek when he was the head of Parks. People knew what he was. So, in time will tell whether he could find a successor, Walt. And I know a lot of people are up. We all like Josh tomorrow, but I don't think he's ready, or I don't know if he could be the next CEO. We'll find out. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I going back to something that you just pointed out, which you're right. I just thought about that. The nickeling and diming of the customer base started a long time ago, mm-hmm. and who was in charge of that, mm-hmm. which reinforces my argument that Iger was still the CEO. Mm-hmm. He witnessed the nickeling and diming of it. He may have pushed back. I don't know. Obviously, he was the boss. Mm-hmm. He could have completely told, mm-hmm. Said, no, we're going to nix this idea. It's terrible. He kind of let it go. Like you said, the park, the parking was something that was never there. And that all of a sudden became mm-hmm. a big thing for hotel reservations. And I think if we sit and think about things and we make a list, we could probably think of a lot of other things that were, eliminated or price increases that occurred. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but remember the RFID chips on the bottom of your soda cup? Was that under? I
want to say yes. Yeah, because it was only the past couple of years. Well, I mean, it was pre-pandemic,
right?
But it was definitely I'm
because that was another thing
99.9%.
that was something that stuck in everybody's craw, was that, wait a minute, I could go get a refill anytime I wanted, and then all of a sudden they decided, no, sorry, you can only get 3 refills, and then they put time constraints on it, which was another thing.
Yeah, they put the time on it. It was like, you have 33
insane.
minutes left.
Yeah, like I have to suck down my soda because I have to run back there to get my refill before it expires. So things like that did take place. So you're right. I mean, so then you say to yourself, well, you start to then question, and this is, again, the bottom line is we're glad that Bob Chapek is gone. Agreed. Because the way the company was headed, this was not going to end well.
No.
But the flip side of that is that everybody has kind of thrown, up balloons and fireworks for Mr. Iger's return. And let me pump the brakes on that a little bit, because people are forgetting that, Bob Iger was there when all of these things were occurring in the parks, and he really didn't do anything to change it. He kind of just let it go. So, to your point, you're right. I mean, this was something that was going on prior to Iger stepping down, and then he still appointed this guy as the successor. So begs the question, did he really set him up for failure so that he could now come in and have a couple of more years to, quote unquote, clean up the mess that in reality he probably would have had to have implemented some of these things just from a financial standpoint. And instead of being the bad guy and tarnishing his legacy in this, he now looks like the savior because the other guy, pooped the bed. And, well,
think about this for a second. Well, I almost took my microphone out. Think about this for a second. Even if all of this eventually had to be done, now you said the pandemic, no one saw that coming. But if they say the park reservation system and all that changed, like we lost Fast Pass, we lost Extra Magic, you name it. If you did that slowly over time, over years, it's different than we took it all at once. We lost it all basically at once, and then Chapek turns around and raises prices through the roof, which Iger has also said he was not happy with the massive price increases under the Chapek era. He felt that they were pricing people out, which you and I have said. That was his goal, was to price people out, period, and make the most amount of money as possible. But it's funny, real quick, back to the chips and the soda. I was so happy because a couple years ago, was a pre-pandemic, the chip, when you put it down and it reads the chip and you hit your refill, well, it was broken at the Polynesian for quite some time. I got 2+ trips out of going there, getting free soda. Boom. Take that, Chapek. And your chips.
You beat the man.
I beat the man.
We're gonna move along, but one of the things I think we're gonna eventually on either the next show or a later show, we're gonna kind of delve into this a little deeper, because we have a lot of things that we want to talk about the possible changes that might be coming, some future theories that we have for things, and it's just there's a lot of layers to this that we can kind of peel back and talk about because of the immediate change that occurred that really was pretty much, you could say, unexpected. It was hoped for. It
was definitely hoped for. Walter, I was shocked. I'm still shocked.
Yeah. So, but we definitely are going to touch on this a little deeper because there are a lot of other little interesting things, like the Hollywood Reporter just put out there this week, that the possible mega deals that might happen. That's an interesting topic also that we want to discuss, because both Ken and I do feel that down the road at some point, one or more of those may occur. Or it's inevitable, really. So, so let's move on to the remaining must-dos that we had from our last episode.
We're forgetting one thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Splash Mountain. Splash Mountain news
Oh,
broke
yes,
yesterday.
yes. So they announced, I believe, January 23rd will be the last day of the old Splash Mountain. So if you are jonesing for going on Splash Mountain for the last time under the current theming, you may want to get to Magic Kingdom relatively soon, before the 23rd of January.
So it's funny because it's becoming Tiana after the 23rd of January. It'll be no longer it'll be retired permanently and replaced by Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Now, Walt, it caught me off guard a little bit. How long are they expecting this ride to be down for?
Well, I just saw an article where they're speculating that this might be down until late 24, possibly even into 25, which would be insane. So Tiana's Adventure, just for those that aren't familiar with it, is from The Princess and the Frog. And from my understanding, it's going to be an interior change, theming change, and refurb. But they're not building a brand new ride. It's the same ride that still exists there. It's not like they're, imploding Splash Mountain. So, I really don't understand why it's taking that long. I mean, you're not building something from the ground up the way they did with Tron, where that's taken like 5 years. With this, I really don't understand why they can't do this within a year's time, maybe even less than that. The layout of the interior track and the logs themselves and the water, that's all going to stay. So if you're just putting in new animation and new theming, we're not in an era right now where there were restrictions with construction the way that were during COVID. So at that time, you could have, it was conceivable that you could say, I understand why it's going to take so long, because there might be, supply chain issues with construction, supplies or any of that type of stuff. And maybe there still is to an extent, but this is the Walt Disney Company. So I would assume that they have access to things a lot quicker than you and I do at Home Depot. So, I don't understand why it's taken so long. I really don't. And to me, I think it's disappointing, because you're going through, maybe not so much now during the winter months, but you're going to go through now next summer, where that is a ride that's beloved by many people.
Yes, it is.
And now it's not going to be accessible to go there. So are you going to get a discount on your Magic Kingdom ticket for that? Not likely.
No. Not even under Iger, you're not getting that.
No. So, I mean, are you surprised by how long it's going to take? Because I certainly am.
No. And we talked about it earlier, Walt, that maybe under the Iger era 2.0, that this could get done quicker, because like we stated earlier in the show, so much of the power and responsibility was taken away from all the heads of their departments. So hopefully now that Josh Tomorrow and all those guys and girls will have basically almost like full autonomy, like, hey, get the job done. I don't care how you got to do it, get the job done. That it will get done quicker, and it will go back to the way things used to be, where, you saw progress at a much quicker rate. So fingers crossed, because otherwise you're looking at what? And they're not even saying sometime in, what was it, 2025, Walt?
Yeah, they're possibly
2 years,
like the spring of 25 now. So because think about it, you're not going to open it in the middle of winter. It's a water ride. Yeah. So you're going to want to probably open it around Memorial Day weekend or
2+ years
summer. Maybe 4th of July, something like that. So that would have been my guess for next year. Is I would have thought, okay, maybe by the 4th of July weekend or even Labor Day weekend, you could have opened it. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Think about this, Walt, because it's closing on January 23rd, and generally it's cooler that time of year in Florida. And that ride, a lot of times you could get on quicker because of the temperatures.
Absolutely,
especially if you have the cooler days. I don't think the temperature is going to matter, because the lines are going to be packed for people getting on it one last time. Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I could definitely see that. So on to our remaining must-dos. We had 2 parks that were left on the list. It was Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios. Which one do you want me to go to first?
Whichever one you like. 'Tis the season.
We'll go to Hollywood Studios. So at Hollywood Studios, on my must-do list, I have 3 rides. Rise of the Resistance, Toy Story Mania, and Tower of Terror. So actually, you know what? I apologize, Ken.
You did do that. I was sitting there. I'm like, wait a minute. We did that last show.
So I apologize. That's my fault. Actually,
you can do it again, Walt. You can do whatever you want.
It was, I believe that we had done Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, so we didn't do Animal Kingdom and Epcot. Those were the two.
Yes.
I'm messing that up. So at Animal Kingdom, I have the Lion King show, which has always been one of my favorite things, one of my must-dos. It's almost Broadway quality show in Disney. Really super entertaining. Avatar, the ride, and of course Pandora, the land that the ride is in. Those are my my 3 must-dos. Pandora is visually extraordinarily appealing, especially at night. If you can go there when it's lit up, it's really really I mean it's one of the best themed parts of the park, I think, maybe in all of Disney World. And Avatar was at one time the #1 ride, in my opinion, at Disney World, which was supplanted by Guardians of the Galaxy, which is actually on my list for Epcot. But getting back to the Animal Kingdom list, what do you feel about that, Ken?
I'm going to say 2 out of the 3. Actually, no. I'm with you on the Lion King show. I enjoy the Lion King show a lot, and I have seen a few shows on Broadway, and I totally agree with you that it is. I haven't seen it since its full return yet from the COVID era, but I really enjoyed it. The only thing I do not like about it, it's bad on the keister. The bench seating is bad, but other than that, it is a terrific show. With just they do an excellent job. It's something that I couldn't do. I'd be in the hospital. But yes, I'm definitely with you 100% on the Lion King show. My other must-do for Animal Kingdom is the safari. I love the safari. And when I was back there in late August, early September, we talked about it on a couple shows ago. I was able to get tickets for Moonlight Magic, which is exclusive for Disney Vacation Club members, and I was able to get right on it right before, because that actually wasn't going to be open during the Moonlight Magic, but we were able to get in early, and I was able to get on it with it was a walk-on, which I was excited about, and got to see some cool things, and it was good because the animals were very they were jacked up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of them running around, and I have some video of it, and so it was a good ride. It was a good experience that time, but I enjoyed a safari each and every time. Those are my 2. Like, you know me, well, I am not a big Animal Kingdom guy. Okay, number 3, Dino Land. That gets me jacked. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say we're going to have to ban you on that one.
I was going to throw it in there. 'Tis the season, Dino Land. Check it out before its extinction. But yeah, so for the safari and the Lion King show are my definitely must-dos for Animal Kingdom.
Yeah, awesome. So let's move on to Epcot. Over at Epcot, I have the obviously most iconic at Epcot, which is Spaceship Earth. It's the most visible one that you can see. You see it immediately as you pull up. It's the first ride that I went on when I first visited Disney World on my honeymoon. So I was that your first ride in Disney World?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. My number 2 on there is Guardians of the Galaxy. That's obviously brand new. And I think that is now currently the best ride on property, with a close number 2 being Avatar, like I said earlier. Number 3 on my Epcot list, my favorite watering hole in the Mexico Pavilion, La Cava Tequila, with the best margaritas on property. The blood orange margarita is, I never miss it. So I always have to go there and get one.
I'm trying it next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend that. And this kind of ties in with the with the dining is Le Cellier. So that's also one of my must do's. One of the better, if not the best, steak on property. If it's not the best, it's definitely in the top 2 or 3. But I think it's in the top. I think it's number 1 in my opinion. But those are my must do's for Epcot. If you're obviously there are a lot of things to do in Epcot that are interesting. You have Frozen, you have Ratatouille, all relatively new rides, but on my must-do list, I would put those 4 things.
All right. So my must-dos are a little different. One we agree on, Spaceship Earth, number 1. Love it. Whenever I don't know, because of the plague, it was supposed to go through a transformation, a refurbishment, and that was postponed, which was good because we still get to enjoy it. But yeah, Spaceship Earth is definitely on top of my list when I go to Epcot. Number 2, Walter, very upset with you because you didn't pick this. 3 Caballeros over in the Mexico Pavilion.
Okay.
I love that. I don't know. I know it gets a lot of slack. It needs to be updated. They want to do we talked about maybe doing like a layover or changing over to Coco. That would be cool, and I would be totally excited for that. But I do love me some 3 Caballeros. I love that ride, the Grand Fiesta Tour. So
while you're on the ride, I would be over at La Cava Tequila waiting for you to get off.
That's fine. When I get off the ride, you grab me a drink. So the Spaceship Earth is number 1. The Grand Fiesta Tour over the Mexico Pavilion is number 2. I'm going to tell you right now, if we're the land, what am I thinking about it? The ride in the land. Living with the Land. I'm sorry.
Living with the Land.
Yeah, it totally I went blank. Living with the Land. If you haven't done it during Christmas time, that is a great overlay to do. And I highly, highly, highly suggest it. It's really cool, Walt. I was able to experience it one time, and I still see video now and pictures from people who are there currently, and it looks just as good, if not better. So that is definitely, especially during the holiday season, definitely check out.
During the holidays.
It is really cool. I really enjoy it. Now, I know I'm in the minority, but I really enjoy that ride. I'm not a thrills. Everyone knows that by now. I'm not a thrills guy. So it is one of my top rides. And my 4th must do, Frozen. I love Frozen. Everyone knows Frozen. And I like to go backwards now on Frozen.
I was going to say that's a revelation because you never like to go backwards.
Yep. I'm going to have to post a picture. I will on Instagram. Is that my last picture on Frozen? I was totally ready, and I totally blocked this whole family out because I had my hands up.
So somebody has your hand in their family photo.
Yes, they're going to see me like this. And then last for dining, and it is no surprise, and Walter, you touched on it, Le Cellier. Love it. Love it. I almost every trip I have to go. It's just that good. So that is my must-dos for Epcot.
All right. So I think we're going to wrap up the show for this week. We like earlier we touched on this. We're going to probably end up doing some sort of another Iger Chapek topic on our next episode and kind of delve into that a little bit. And then we're also going to touch on some Christmas theming and some Christmas topics that Ken and I like for our next episode, which will be coming out right before the holidays.
Yep, it'll be our last one of the year.
Yep, absolutely. And but one bit of news that we want to share with everyone is we have our first business affiliation with the Magic Candle Company. So Ken will be posting a link on our show notes and on our Instagram and YouTube pages in the very near future. So we would really appreciate you checking that out when you get an opportunity. And Ken, anything else you want to add before we?
Nope. Very excited that we're in the affiliate program now at Magic Candle Company, and if you like Walter said, we'll put the links in the show notes on Instagram, wherever we're at. And anytime you look to purchase from that company, you use our link, and it greatly helps out the show. So we would really, really appreciate it, especially we're in the season of giving.
And it makes a great gift. It really does.
It makes a great gift because I got one right there. Christmas shop's going right now.
Yep, there's one right over my shoulder, too.
Yep, as always, you always have them up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, well,
all right.
Good place. Well, all right, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of the Disney Resorts podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. For Walt Ramirez, I'm Kenny Hayes. Take care, everybody.